Hello, everyone. Hello, my name is Scott Ryan. I am the managing editor of the Blue Rose magazine and several David Lynch books. And what do we think? Pretty simple movie, right? I mean, it's kind of like every Marvel movie we've seen, are we right? It's the same. And any of you any parents here? I mean, come on.
Not many.
We know. We felt that. I thought about it. Let's bring up the DP, the director of photographer from that film, Mr. Frederick Owens. Now, let's start with this. That's your first film. Where do you go after that? I mean, did your parents say, you got to get a real job? What are you doing? I mean, how was it to start with Eraserhead?
That was a rough one. I did Valley Girl after this.
But I mean, a student film is not normally shown all these years later and played at midnight everywhere. So set the stage for people about what it was like to be on that crew.
You know, it's funny because when I haven't watched the film in a while, and to watch the end credits and see the American Film Institute tag at the end, you know, they supported it. They made it happen for us. Most of the, not all the money, but much of the money came, and the support in the laboratory deals came from them. And when the AFI was formed, it was a nonprofit educational, like a school that was made with ties to the film industry in Los Angeles to draw on the talent and the knowledge that was there to educate young people. And every one of them, those people in the film industry said, just as long as you're not going to be making money on the films. and you know, sure enough, you know, Eraserhead's done pretty well for all these years.
And one of the stories that Charlotte Stewart has talked about is how, like you said, you don't get paid, but David did pay everyone eventually.
Well, David, so yes, at a certain point, David said, look, you know, I can't pay you even per diem. I don't have enough money for the food anymore. I can't serve lunch. So I'm going to give you all percentage. And we said, okay, sure. You know, let's just get it done. You know, because at that point we would stop off at Kodak on the way to work, on the way to shooting that day, and pick up a roll of film because nobody else could afford to buy one. You know, and sure enough, you know, he kept his word. So.
And that says a lot about David Lynch as a person. Tell me what it's like to be friends with David Lynch.
That's a hard one. You know, David was a very regular guy. He was, as he described himself, a Montana Boy Scout. You know, he was very straightforward, straight ahead, very honest about what he said and what he thought with people. During partway through the shooting, actually relatively early in the shooting, the Maharishi came up, and you know, people, the Beatles had visited the Maharishi, and David, through his sister, fell in love with the notion of consciousness and meditating as a way to change your consciousness. And so we were all initiated relatively early on in our lives about you know, to meditate, and we did that regularly. And David, of course, was a pretty thoroughly regular meditator, unlike the rest of us. But you know, he lived by that, and he wrote by it, and he formed a foundation that supported people who couldn't afford to do it themselves, to you know, to change their lives and to try meditation.
Here's a question I'm sure you've answered a million times, but for some people out there that just don't really understand what a director or photographer is, what was your job on Eraserhead?
Well, Eraserhead was a little different. I mean, a cinematographer, director of photography, really is in charge of speaking, communicating, interfacing with the director and the production designer to make the photography of the story, you know, to be the visual words for what the director is doing. In this case, it was all compressed. So it was David's vision of the story, David's story to begin with. He wrote it, he directed it. There was no art director, it was David and me and a couple of other crew members who helped build all those sets. We really did it with a crew of 5 or 6 people, pretty much the whole film. So in this job as the cinematographer, I was up there on the ladder setting the lights. You know, I was doing those things that the gaffer and the grip, the other parts of my camera crew would normally do. But most of it is about communication. It's about asking the director the right questions and saying, you know, what's the feeling of this scene? What's the mood in the room? And then looking at the story and saying, where are we in the story and what's the progression of the character and how is the character feeling, and finding a way to try to capture some of that, you know, with the light and with the camera move.
David Lynch is a painter first. And you were there as he's becoming this director, how did you communicate with a painter to get it to be a moving picture?
That wasn't easy. You know, because painting is such a solitary art form. It really is just you and how you feel at that moment, whether you use, you know, this dark gray or this light gray in that one spot on the canvas, and then you step back and you look at it. In the movie making business, it really is seeing the actor stand there in the light, changing the light a little bit, then stepping back and saying, well, is that any better? Just look through the camera and see if you see it any better, you know? And he would say, generally, David would say, well, no, it's not dark enough. and so I would, you know, turn the light down a little bit, and he would say, well, yeah, maybe just a little darker, you know, and that's how we landed at this very, very low, this very shadowy feeling, you know, and to be you know, completely fair about it, I didn't start the film. Herb Cardwell was another cinematographer who was David's friend, who he brought to Los Angeles to get started, and Herb had to take, you know, paying work after a certain point, and I was just a starving student, so I was kind of okay to carry on. But yeah, it was a matter of asking those questions and trying to pick his brain to start to communicate how this, you know, two-dimensional words on the page would lift off and make the audience feel something when the actor turned his face away in the light.
Tell us something about Jack Nance. You know, for us Twin Peaks fans, he will always be Pete Martell to us, and he was such a character in real life as well. Do you have any stories about Jack Nance?
Oh boy, stories. Well, there's always stories. Yeah, I mean, you know, Jack was a trooper. I don't, you know, anyone who could wear their hair like that for 4 years, you know, had some dedication. It kind of hurt the rest of his acting career a little bit to have to be tied to us. But he did other acting, and he was, you know, trained as a theater actor along with Catherine Coulson, the camera assistant. So, you know, it really was a pretty happy family, this tight cluster of people who really stayed together that long for years, you know, without any visible means of employment and pay.
So why did you stay with it? I mean, what kept you there Because this movie's strange today, but it had to be really strange in '77.
It was strange, you know, when this opened at a festival in Los Angeles at the time called FilmX, and they had a midnight. They had started this idea of a midnight screening. Just buy a ticket, come at midnight. We're not going to tell you anything about it, and you're going to be surprised. So you know, sure enough, the audience, I mean, the theater was packed, and they were really surprised.
This movie could have played at 1 PM, and they would have been surprised.
No, midnight, they were kind of ready for it, but you could have heard a pin drop after, because you know, nobody knew quite what to say, or should we do? You're supposed to applaud, or. But after that screening, I mean, David realized a lot of things. Actually, he realized that the film was a little long. It wasn't quite exactly as honed as he wanted to, and he did make some changes before it went into distribution. So there was a longer version of the film as originally conceived. But I mean, this is what's out there, and they remixed and they recut the negative, and they made this happen. And you know, when we finish the film, you finish a film, you make some prints, you see it go out into the world. This was finished, we made one print, and they sent it to New York. And so I was in Los Angeles touting the only film I'd shot, Eraserhead, and I would have to say, you have to go to New York to see it at midnight, which didn't help me at all. But eventually there were 3 prints, you know, and then it opened in a couple more cities, and finally, you know, many years later, we actually made some sort of video version of it, which launched it into the world as well.
Yeah, that's when I first saw it working at Video Time, just seeing that cover and thinking, I gotta take this home. This is gonna be interesting.
You didn't pay?
No, I didn't pay. I waited till my manager left. I stole all kinds of things from that store. The police are still looking for me. How long into your career before Eraserhead became a classic and you got work from it? Because I'm assuming it took a while, but there has to come a time.
I'm still waiting for that. There are other films that have helped me more than Eraserhead.
But there has to be some young people, like so many people, this was become a cult classic. So I would think that that you get some cool cred that you do.
I'm joking. Yes, it was wonderful. It was wonderful because it did become that set piece. It was wonderful because it was shot in black and white, and not so many people were doing that. It was really, really hard to convince, as it still is, it's hard to convince producers and production companies often to shoot it in black and white and really go for it, really commit it. When we made this film, you know, what you see is really the black and white set that we built. So we painted shades of gray. You know, all the costumes were pretty much played in shades of gray, just so you could look at it by eye in the lighting and see what it was going to be on the film. So we kind of, as much as we could, eliminated color, from the movie. We eliminated sunlight from the movie. I mean, there really aren't any moments of sunlight. The couple times that we shot outside, we had to wait for overcast, which was hard in Los Angeles. I mean, it's really bright and sunny all the time.
So how did you come to Blue Velvet from that? Why go back and work with him again? What drew you back?
Well, I think it's David that drew me back. I mean, it's David's, it's the way David approached storytelling that was so unique to me. And as I said, I had worked on other films, sort of just after Eraserhead and around and about Blue Velvet. Every director has a different approach to telling a story, every director has different needs, different ways that they have to act to make this story happen for them. And it is the way they interact with actors, it's the way they interact with the crew, it's their priorities. I mean, certainly for David Lynch, the feeling of the palette of grays, the sense of the light, the harshness of it, the deepness of the shadows was really, really important to him. And I loved that dedication to the photography, to the technical things that I could control that had an impact on how this story was going to be seen by the audience. And to bring that to color was a wonderful experiment for us in Blue Velvet, because Blue Velvet, was a film of color. We tried some things. Oddly, we tried in the planning and pre-production stages. We tried to desaturate the color, to take some of those shades of Blue Velvet and the wall color of Dorothy's apartment and desaturate them optically, thinking that might be a way to get this story told, to create a feeling. And it just turned out to be exactly the wrong thing to do. The Kodak stock of the era and some filtration and diffusion that I had used on lenses, and these older lenses that we were using and testing at the time, all fell into place to make this vibrant sort of, really blue color and really blue sky and this mauve color of Dorothy's apartment, happen as a way to support the sense of the story for David.
It's really interesting that you did Eraserhead, which has no color, and then I would pick Blue Velvet as his most colorful picture. It's sort of interesting that you worked on both of them. I've been lucky enough to interview a lot of people who worked with David Lynch, and what I find so amazing is those people would do anything to achieve David's vision. All of them, all the way down the line. They just want to help David. You've worked with many directors. Why was David Lynch able to do that in a way that it appears from the outside that all directors don't get that from their crew?
It's true. It's completely true. David was a very charismatic person. He drew you in. He drew you into his vision thoroughly. So it was something that he asked questions. He asked how we could do this. How would you make, I don't know, in Wild at Heart, there's this funny scene where it's just a couple characters walking around in a big open empty space in Texas. And he said, there's a bird, there's a shadow of a bird that flies over the scene, and you just see the shadow, you don't see the bird, and it just is incidental. And boy, we spent 45 minutes figuring that out. It turned out to be a cardboard bird on a wire that we could start and shoot down, and it would just, depending on where the sun was, we could make that happen. So it was his interest in making it a process, in drawing us all in to solve this problem. And the problem wasn't really even the issue. The problem, the whole exercise was, how do we do this together?
It's just so fascinating because you would think every director would want that, but to me it comes back to kindness, and I think David Lynch had a kindness in him. Mm-hmm. If you guys are annoyed that I haven't asked enough Blue Velvet or Wild at Heart questions, no reason to be annoyed. We're going to have Fred back at those screenings, so you come to those screenings, you'll get those answers, come to all of the showings we have. All of us here are hurting. We miss David. We're sad that his career is going to have now a beginning, middle, and an end. Make us feel better.
Well, I will say that each movie with David was a new adventure. Even a simple fragrance commercial for Armani or television, whatever, became an adventure because that process was important to him. He knew how the light should feel. He knew how it should look on the actor's face. He didn't know how to get there. He enlisted us to help him get there. When you see the sparks flying, on a couple of the shots in Eraserhead, we had no idea how to do this. We went to the Hollywood experts, the visual effects guys, and said, how do you do this? How do you make this? And they would list all these things that you needed and how you make opticals. And they said, we said, so what if you didn't have any money? And they said, oh, well, yeah, okay, so we used to do it this way. We used to take a grinding wheel and a piece of, a piece of metal and rub it up against it and just shoot the sparks all over the actor. And that's what we did. It just seemed like...
Yeah, Charlotte Stewart still has the scars all over her. That's incredible. Well, we all want to thank you for coming out and sharing your stories with us. And we will see you here for Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart. You've had an incredible career, and we thank you so much for this.
Thank you all for coming.
All right. We'll see you for Lost Highway in a little bit.
These are some pretty great scenes.